I think we're really enjoying this discussion. I have to say, I really respect everyone on this panel so much, and I'm gaining so much. And to hear the comments back and forth, it's like, it's very exciting for me and us.
Okay, so I want to, okay, so the first question then is, to date, do any GMOs on the market deliver consistently and significantly higher intrinsic yields than the natural crop from which they were derived? How does this compare to natural breeding?
I think there's a really simple answer. Is you just go to the National Academy of Sciences report. They came out about a year and a half ago. They asked this exact question. Esteemed top scientists from all over the country. They conclude, and Sheldon can add to this if you are inclined, and one of their conclusions, there were a whole range of them, but one of them was that there was no apparent difference between the yields from GMOs and the yields that were otherwise occurring across the spectrum in American agriculture. So essentially, yields have been increasing over the past 40 or 50 years, but the National Academy found no particular contribution of GMOs to those yield increases.
Yeah, the New York Times did a front page story. Danny Hakim, you can look it up, Google it up on that satanic machine, and it'll tell you Danny Hakim, H-A-K-I-M. The New York Times did a study of the European production. They don't use GMOs versus U.S. production. They found that European production was superior. You can also get Consumers Union's wonderful study called A Failure to Yield, which I think kind of is a spoiler alert there for what it says. I don't think any credible science at this point can say it increases yield.
What do you think of this statement made by the biotech proponents that millions of people in the U.S. have been eating GM food for a decade and no one has gotten sick?
You can take that up, John.
I think
that's your baby.
I'll take that one. Actually, we think that millions of people are getting sick because of GMOs and Roundup, and with thousands of doctors now prescribing non-GMO diets and seeing consistent and dramatic improvements. It's a question of don't look, don't tell. There's been no human clinical trials, no post-marketing surveillance, and they have a machine set up of attacking any adverse finding. Now, if it's a drug, you're allowed to have an adverse finding. You're allowed to have a side effect. But you're not allowed to have a side effect if you're food. And so there's a theory, the concept, the political concept, is that there's no difference. And that came from, when it was approved, the person in charge of policy at the FDA was Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, later Monsanto's vice president. And there was a concept of substantial equivalence. When you look at the actual memos of the scientists at the FDA, they said GMOs were different and led to different risks, including allergens, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems, and should be studied. But the White House gave orders to the FDA to promote GMOs. So the commissioner proudly in one of the memos said, this policy basically is accord with your instructions. But when it was reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget and by the Human Health and Human Services, as it went up the political ladder, they said, oh, we have to take out these 12 pages about the environment. We have to make sure that it indicates that it's not different than GMOs. We should make sure it's clean. As it went up the political ladder, it got safer and safer. And so the official political position in the United States is there's no difference. And on that basis, it's allowed to be considered, no safety testing, et cetera. But if they find one problem, it could knock the house of cards down. So they have a echo chamber of fake organizations, so-called scientists, bought media, et cetera, so that if there's any problem that's raised, they attack the scientists, they attack the finding, they come up with talking points, and within 24 hours, they're circulated all around. So this is one of the most unscientific things that they ever say is this sentence, that millions of people are eating it and there's no problem, trillions of meals. It's one of the most under-supported statements by science because they're putting their blinders on, they're looking at what they want to look at, and they're not looking at actual impacts.
And they know that these herbicide and these toxic biocide residues do create harm. What they're saying is that the genetic manipulation in and of itself, not the fact that these have these residues on it, and the EPA has keep rising these residues. So all that, we used to have very small residues allowed for Roundup. Now you have huge residues allowed for Roundup, and 2,4-D, and dicamba. We know those cause illness, peer-reviewed studies all over the place. We now know that there's no consensus whatsoever. As Jeffrey was saying, the genetic manipulations themselves, they're not well known. They're not well characterized in many cases, and they themselves can have a lot of health issues that we haven't even found out yet, because the government's not looking, the corporations aren't looking. So you have a very few independent scientists who somehow get enough money to look, and then whenever they actually find something, that's shot down. But the government isn't looking, and the corporations aren't looking. So these very courageous independent scientists, the only people looking to answer this question as far as the genetic manipulations, we know it's answered as far as the biocides, but as far as this aspect of the danger, and they're attacked when they come out. So that shows you how fixed the game is.